Good morning and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. First, the headlines. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky denounces Russia for using gas as a weapon in the war after provider Gazprom announced it was shutting supply to Poland and Bulgaria. Well, U.S. President Joe Biden expected to address Russia's latest move and Ukraine's fight against Russia today. Plus, Russia claims the southern Ukrainian city of Kherson will from May 1st begin transiting to using the rubble. Welcome again. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced Russia's decision to halt supplies to Bulgaria and Poland as blackmail of Europe. Talking about gas now, in his regular evening videos on Wednesday night, President Zelensky said Russia considers not only gas but any trade as a weapon. It is just waiting for the moment when one or another trade area can be used to blackmail Europeans politically. Russia halted gas supplies to Bulgaria and Poland on Wednesday for rejecting its demand for payment in ruble. Poland and Bulgaria are both former Soviet-era satellites of Moscow that have since joined the EU and NATO. Poland has been one of the Kremlin's most vocal opponents over the war. Bulgaria, on the other hand, has a long, warmer relations with Russia, but Prime Minister Kirill Petkov, an anti-graft campaigner who took office last year, has denounced the invasion of Ukraine. Both countries facing the halt in the gas supplies have been responding to Russia's decision. On Wednesday, Poland called it a breach in contract, but said it still had supplies to last while it seeks other alternatives. For people in Bulgaria, though, reactions have been mixed. Some were surprised at first, then happy. Others thought the move to be a bit extreme but justified. One analyst even said Russia will use Europe's dependence on gas to have Bulgaria and EU partners accepting their conditions, including payment in rubles. He also said he expected Russian informal networks of influence in the country to use the moment and put pressure on the government to resign by spreading propaganda narratives. Bulgaria's Prime Minister Kirill Petkov told a news conference in Sofia that Bulgaria will not sway from the contract it holds with Gazprom, while his Polish counterpart, Mateusz Borowski, says Poland will do everything to impose contractual fines on Russia.
The Russian interests who have been around are currently part of political and economic groups in Bulgaria. We believe that behind them stands 3 billion of Bulgarian money spent for the Turkish Stream pipeline. The offer for the gas power plant in the Recovery and Resilience Plan and the rejection of Azeri gas that was made instead of having our diversification now, and the delay of more than 10 years of Greek interconnection. At the same time, we take a clear position in the conflict, the war in Ukraine. We're not trying to balance our position where we see clear aggression from one foreign country over another European country. What you can expect from our political party is clear positions, Bulgarian interests, sovereignty, independence. When we talk about our interests, you can see that all of our actions will be for the prosperity of our country.
Do wszystkich naszych partnerów w Unii Europejskiej nie tylko o to, aby
We are not going to pay in rubles for Russian gas, so we appeal to our partners in the EU not to do so. First of all, we want to create a special customs mechanism for gas and oil coming from Russia. This way, they can't easily acquire other markets. And secondly, we want to introduce secondary sanctions. Regarding further levels of energy supply, there are several reserve plans already in place to avoid being caught unawares. This way, the Polish economy will suffer as little as possible from reducing its gas supply.
There'll be another round of diplomatic talks for the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who's being expected in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, today to meet with President Volodymyr Zelensky. Mr. Guterres was in Moscow earlier this week, yesterday to be precise, to make an appeal to Russian President Vladimir Putin about the war in Ukraine. During the talks, Mr. Guterres made it clear the UN considered Russia's actions an invasion and repeated calls for Russia and Ukraine to work together to set up safe humanitarian corridors. In a tweet yesterday after he landed in Ukraine, Guterres promised to continue our work to expand humanitarian support and secure the evacuation of civilians from conflict zones. He also told Portuguese media that President Putin had agreed in principle to evacuate the hundreds of civilians trapped in the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol, but he said the operation was complicated and particularly delicate. In the meantime, President Joe Biden of the United States will be addressing Ukraine's fight against Russia today, following that visit by Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to Kyiv over the weekend. The White House says the president will deliver remarks on support for Ukrainians defending their country and their freedom against Russia's brutal war. That visit by the two top officials of the Biden administration comes as President Biden announced an $800 million military aid package last week to help Ukraine fight off invading Russian forces in the Donbas region, just a week after announcing a separate $800 million package. The VOA's Anna Chernikova is in Kyiv, from where she joins us. Anna, great to see you this morning. What has the Ukrainian government said about Gazprom shutting supplies to Poland and Bulgaria? I know we heard, we know that President Zelensky has already reacted to this, but what else is it reading from Russia's actions?
Good morning. President Zelensky has already mentioned this before, and he repeated this yesterday in the evening that, of course, Europe should understand that it's not only about oil and gas, it's about, in general, about economic trade with Russia. And the Ukrainian position here is that Europe in particular and the whole world in general should understand that they're not going to be any trustful relationship with Russia from now on or in the future because of what they're doing at the moment. And President Zelensky and the Ukrainian government, they consider this as a blackmail of Europe, blackmail of the whole world, and they don't clearly see any future for this, for the economic trade with Russian Federation.
And the Russian president has also threatened Western countries sending interventions into Ukraine. While these countries have ramped up support for Ukraine in recent days, especially, what is Ukraine doing to protect itself from what could possibly happen following Russia's threats? The Russian president said, the response, Russia's response has already been prepared, and of course, it cannot dissuade from that.
Well, this is not the first threat that that comes from Russian Federation officials. In Ukraine, intelligence service in particular is taking care of that, and as we know, Ukrainian intelligence is cooperating with the U.S. intelligence and with British intelligence. So I think that this is blackmail, and all these threats would not change any perception of Ukrainian partners, European partners, US partners. And Ukraine is definitely keeping all this in secret. So if we look in the history of this war, which is now more than 2 months, at the beginning, we had much more public information about which kind of weapon is coming and when. Now we receive all this information as a fact. So all these supplies are quite secret, and all these supplies are definitely hidden from any, as much as possible from any intervention. So in Ukraine, there are not fears that this threats might change anything because Europe has already seen all the crimes and all the military crimes that Russia has already done. And I think that everyone are over that already.
But will the destruction to railway lines be a problem for Ukraine receiving those military weapons and the promises made by these Western allies?
What we can definitely see that all the damages to the railway either fixed very fast, either the railway routes are changed. So we know the latest damage was done to the railway in the Odessa region, and it came back to operation in a couple of hours. So Ukraine is definitely protecting the main routes and is doing everything possible to bring it back to operation ASAP. So for the moment, of course, it creates certain difficulties, and it makes it more, it makes it longer to and more time consuming to protect and to continue the supplies. But for the moment, it's not that huge problem that could have been. And it looks like that Ukraine is ready to react quite quickly to this situation.
Well, there's also the concern for Mariupol, and the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres raised this with the Russian president yesterday about creating safe corridors for civilians to leave, to be evacuated. The Russian president promised, that he's also interested in that, the evacuations. But he says this is particularly delicate. He was also talking about the evacuations from the Azovstal steel plant. Just give us an idea of what really is happening in Mariupol right now, as well as in the Azovstal steel plant.
After the meeting by President Putin with UN Secretary General, after the meeting, the press secretary of Mr. Putin said that there were no any agreements or promises. So what we can understand probably from all these that in fact there is no readiness from Putin to take this decision, because the only person who can actually take the decision to let humanitarian corridors and to let humanitarian aid to Mariupol is Putin, and we clearly see that. Situation in Mariupol is catastrophic for a month already, and it's definitely not getting better, and it's definitely getting worse and worse, because people are just keep going with the last strength that they have. It's both for military, for soldiers, and for the civilians. Just a couple of hours ago, the head of Azov battalion told about the situation in Mariupol over the night, and what he mentioned that this night was a night of hell, because all type of equipment was used to bomb and to shell Mariupol city and Azovstal plant in particular. So it's aviation bombardments, it's rocket shellings, and even phosphorus bombs. A lot of phosphorus bombs were used this night in Mariupol. Basically what he said, that what we have seen this night, that Russian forces used everything possible they could for the barbaric actions against humanity. And if you look at the footages from the Azovstal plant shelters, all the civilians and children who are located there for an extremely long time, you can definitely see all this, all their reactions as well, and the state of mind that they have in there as well. So unfortunately, for the moment in Ukraine, there are no hopes that Vladimir Putin will take the action to let Mariupol people out and to let Ukrainian government to exchange military forces. We hope, of course, that Mr. Guterres will do everything he could, and UN as an organization could, to help this situation. But again, the only person who can let this happen is not ready yet. At least this is what we can see from the latest announcement from Kremlin.
pretty interesting and pretty dire situation in Mariupol, as well as the Azovstal steel plant. And let's talk a bit more about Mr. Guterres' visit to Kyiv today. He's already in Ukraine. And I know that, Ukrainians are watching very closely, as these partners come in and speak with the president himself being encouraged, by the visit. But what really could that visit yield? What are the expectations for that?
First of all, there are expectations that Mr. Guterres would see all the military crimes committed by Russian forces in Ukraine on his own, so that he would experience everything that happened in Kyiv region and in other parts of Ukraine, but in particular.
To apologize, do seem to be having problems with Anna's network there. We'll try to reconnect with her to get some more on the situation on the ground. But we spoke about the Russian president earlier. President Vladimir Putin has warned any countries attempting to interfere in Ukraine will face what he calls a lightning-fast response from Russia, and that all decision on how Moscow would react in that situation had already been taken. He was addressing lawmakers in St. Petersburg, where he also said the West wanted to cut Russia into different pieces and accused it of pushing Ukraine into conflict with Russia. Putin also told lawmakers the Russian ruble banking system, transport sector, and economy as a whole had withstood sanctions imposed against Moscow and vowed a response to attempts to isolate Russia. Russia's economy ministry expects the country's gross domestic product to shrink by 8.8% in 2022 in its base case scenario, or by 12.4% under a more conservative scenario. A document that was seen earlier suggesting the sanctions pressure is taking its toll. We'll have more from Anna Chernikova in Ukraine after the break. Plus,
происходящие события со стороны. Все решения у нас на этот счет приняты.
Well, one of Ukraine's mayors, the mayor of Kyiv, warning, or rather encouraging European aspirations, he says, are part of the reason for the war in Ukraine. Welcome back to our continued coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The VOA's Anna Chernikova back with us to give us the update. Anna, before the break, you were talking about the expectations for Mr. Guterres' visit with President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Yeah, so there are hopes that Mr. Guterres will see all the crimes committed by Russian military forces in Ukraine, in particular in Kyiv region, that he can experience that and realize, the scale of these crimes. Of course, it would have been much better if he would visit Kyiv before Moscow, and this is also what President Zelensky mentioned, because, of course, the realization of scale of the war crimes would definitely, shape his, perception of the situation. But again, it's definitely not a big problem, because, of course, the main result of Mr. Guterres' visits is that he would do everything possible, and UN as an organization would do everything possible to organize the humanitarian corridors and humanitarian aid to the civilians in particular, not only in Mariupol, because we should not forget that there is a blockade and problem, especially for the civilians who cannot, get out from hotspots. In the east as well, and Mariupol is just the biggest case. So we just hope that this visit would definitely make a breakthrough in the humanitarian negotiations.
And I'm going to be giving details about this later. There are reports Russia claims that the city of Kherson would begin to use the ruble from May 1st. Tell us more about that.
The city of Kherson, unfortunately, is under Russian control is the longest and the biggest city that is under their control for the longest period of time. during this war. As President Zelensky already mentioned, that if Russian forces would do anything like that, like creating a quasi-republic in Kherson, or trying to, move Kherson to the economic to the economic dimension of Russia, or to announce that Kherson is joining Russia, or whatever, and anything like that, this would be the end of any negotiations that have already taken place or could take place. The same situation with Mariupol, that if Russian forces and Russian side do not agree on humanitarian help for the people of Mariupol and soldiers, this would be the end of negotiations. So if we come back to Kherson, if this would really happen, I think that from the 1st May on, it would be very, very complicated to talk about any further negotiations. And as we can see, for all this period of time, people of Kherson are coming to protests every day. There are pro-Ukrainian protests every day. And people of Kherson made it quite clear that they're not going to support anything like that. They're not going to support any joining to Russia, or creation of a republic, so-called. So this is kind of an escalation of the situation, of the current situation from Moscow. And if they actually do this, I mean, starting rebels in May, this would probably end the negotiation. But again, we will see how it's going to happen. But President Zelensky was quite clear on that.
Wow. That does complicate things on the ground, doesn't it? Anna, thanks again for speaking with us. And again, do stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Britain's Foreign Secretary Liz Truss had a response for Russia regarding support for Ukraine. She told a gathering on Wednesday that countries opposed to Russia's invasion of Ukraine must double down on their support for Kyiv. She also outlined a new approach in which countries should spend more on defense, and where NATO takes a more global outlook, while economic dependency on aggressor nations should be reduced.
We can't be complacent. The fate of Ukraine hangs in the balance. But let's be clear, if Putin succeeds, there will be untold further misery across Europe and terrible consequences across the globe. We would never feel safe again. So we must be prepared for the long haul. We've got to double down on our support for Ukraine, and we must follow through on the unity that we've shown in the crisis. We must reboot, recast and remodel our approach. My vision is a world where free nations are assertive and in the ascendant, where freedom and democracy are strengthened through a network of economic and security partnerships, where aggressors are contained and forced to take a better path. This is the long-term prize, a new era of peace, security and prosperity. Britain has always stood up to bullies. We've always been risk takers, so we are prepared to be bold, using our strength in security and diplomacy, our economic heft and our will and agility to lead the way. We're already stepping up in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is our war. It's everyone's war, because Ukraine's victory is a strategic imperative for all of us.
The International Criminal Court prosecutor Karim Khan says it's time to stand up for justice in Ukraine. The ICC, which handles war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide and crimes of aggression, has no jurisdiction because Iraq and Syria are not members. Khan opened an investigation into Ukraine a week after Russia's February 24 invasion, but Russia has described the ICC as a political instrument, accusing the United States and Britain of hypocrisy for supporting the ICC inquiry into Ukraine after doing everything imaginable to shield their own military.
International law cannot be a passive spectator. It's not really a time for talking, it's a time for action. International law cannot be a passive spectator. It can't be sedentary. It needs to move with alacrity to protect and to insist on accountability. The truth does not need to be a phantom that cannot be grasped. It's grasped by rolling up one's sleeves, by working, by conducting old-fashioned investigative efforts, by using modern technology, harnessing technology, whether it's satellite or radar or interception, and combining it to see what seems to be true. So I think the message at the moment really must be a reinvigoration of the law, an acceleration of effort to make the law solid, to make the law real, and not an abstract principle. Nobody should be a bystander, because if we don't stand up for justice now, who will stand up for justice for any of us?
Also speaking at the ICC Wednesday was human rights lawyer Amal Clooney, who called on countries to focus on international justice for war crimes in Ukraine, so evidence does not sit in storage as it has done for victims of Islamic State in Iraq and in Syria.
Ukraine is today a slaughterhouse, right in the heart of Europe. Putin's aggressive war is so outrageous that even after repeated warnings from the US and Russia's long criminal record, Ukrainians couldn't believe that this could happen. And I still read news headlines not knowing quite how to process them. Could it be that thousands of children are being forcibly deported to Russia? Could it be that teenage girls are being raped in the street in front of their family and their neighbors? Was a building that had the word children on it really bombed? And are civilians today in Mariupol systematically being tortured and starved to death? Unfortunately, the answer is yes. When President Zelensky addressed the Security Council, he compared Russia's soldiers to ISIS. Well, I have spent the last 7 years representing victims of ISIS's genocide. Our great success was that this body, the UN Security Council, in a rare show of unity, agreed to set up an investigation. This happened the year that my children were born, and I remember very well coming to the council to watch the vote. It was my first trip as a working mother. But my children are now almost 5. And so far, most of the evidence that has been collected by the UN is in storage, because there is no international court to put ISIS on trial. And when survivors ask me to explain how can this be, I can only say I am ashamed. I am ashamed that there is no system of justice to respond to mass rape and mass slaughter.
My delegation has taken...
Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says Ukraine's aspirations to be part of Europe are the reason for the war. In an address to the European Committee of the Regions, a lesser-known EU institution bringing together local representatives, the former heavyweight boxing champion spoke about Ukraine's desire to be part of the European Union, whom he called on to stay with Ukraine.
Our wish to be the part of European family, to build democratic, modern European country, European Ukraine is the reason of this war, because our wish to be the member of European family not accept from Russian Federation. They have just go to rebuild Soviet Empire, to rebuild Russian Empire. Please stay with Ukraine. The unity around Ukraine is the key for peace in whole Europe. One more, thank you very much for support. We're still fighting. We're still defending. not just our children, not just our houses. We're fighting and defending the same values and principles what have every one member of European Union.
Joining me now is public affairs analyst Alester Wilcox. He's here in Lagos. Alester, thank you for joining me this morning. And I just wanted to get your thoughts, what's, this war that's entering its third month, and then, the calls for countries to stand by Ukraine, the calls for the International Criminal Court to do something, calls for no one to be a bystander in this war.
Well, Amarachi, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be with you again. I think maybe Putin have had some miscalculation about the objective of the war. And from the day the invasion was launched, it looks as if it was just going to be a walkover, a walk in the park for Russia, having maybe assessed the military capability of Ukraine and thinking that it's something that could just be getting over within a matter of days or at most weeks. But the reality is now done on the fact that the Ukrainians are resilient in defending their country, and they are doing all that at whatever cost to their own security and lives. And again, rallying Europe for support and all whatnot. And again, seriously, like you just aired the British Prime Minister's statement, position on the issue. Europe, or in fact, most part of the world, Europe in particular, cannot sit by and watch Russia succeed in Ukraine, because that would be a bigger threat to the security of Europe as a whole. Because if Russia succeed in Ukraine, bringing down Ukraine and maybe occupying Ukraine, then the tendency for it to start annexing the other smaller countries around it, then Poland is at risk and other countries within Iran. So it's not going to be a walk in the park as Russia has intended. And that is why after trying to take over Kiev and it was unsuccessful, they changed strategy to now concentrate on the eastern part. And that's why Mariupol is becoming very, very much a place, a theater zone, so that at least Russia will see that they got some victory even before any form of negotiations can be done. But I think the Russians are finding it extremely difficult to achieve their military objective, no matter how they have done. And the West, again, is not relenting in their effort to Ukraine, because Ukraine is like a test case as to what Russia can do to all other Europe. Ukraine is a big country in Europe. Imagine the smaller countries within around it. What will happen? So the only weapon Russia has, or Putin has, is that economic weapon, and it only ends with energy supplies. And that's the Russia, I think, might make other countries not to really be hard on them. But security comes before whatever welfare that they're talking about. So they will all defend, put their hands on, and nobody will stand aloof. At this point, nobody is standing aloof, even though the threat of economic issues are still in their face. But they cannot stand aloof because their security is at stake.
Yeah, and speaking of security, that really is at stake, isn't it? This is the second time Russia is warning the Western countries. At the beginning of this war, it warned countries about their interference and said they would also bear Russia's wrath. And again, he's sounding that warning to those countries that are helping Ukraine at this point. We're talking about the war being fought by proxy by these Western countries. When do you think it's time, to really move in on Russia? Because the way things are going, Ukraine, as we know it, is probably going to be over by the time Russia's done.
Well, Putin's warning has gone too many. It's part of statesmanship or part of grandstanding to warn and to warn. And from origin, he had, first and foremost, he lied to everybody that he wasn't going to invade Ukraine. And so, but of course, the intelligence services of Britain and America and other places were giving the right information to the fact that Putin is, as a matter of fact, the dates and the timelines were all being so they had quite a substantial information about Russia's activity and Russia's movement around before this whole war started. So the West is not lying low, and there's a wider cooperation within the Ukrainian Secret Service, the American and the British. The British has been very, very vocal, quite unlike Britain. They've been very, very vocal on this issue in terms of their intelligence services and gathering of intelligence with respect. So the warnings for me is part of being, showing grandstand and statesmanship. Well, it has come too many. The West cannot put a boot on the ground against Russia. It's not possible for now. That's why I say it's a proxy war, because these are superpowers and with nuclear capabilities. So anything that will eliminate the resorting to nuclear war will be limited, but will be avoided by everybody. And that is also why Russia is also doing what they are doing, because he knows he might want to drag in the West and then escalate the war to become a third world war. And of course, when that happens, nuclear arsenal will be deployed, and the West will not want that. Russia wouldn't care, because it's not accountable in all respect, not democratically accountable. I saw the president of Russia, that's Putin, speaking to his parliament. I wonder the kind of power that parliament has. Russia is run like a one-man state. No matter the size and no matter the military credentials they claim, Israel is run like a one-man. So I wonder the kind of power that the parliament he was addressing has. So the West will not want to confront Russia directly. That's why you see series of aid, series of military assistance is pouring in. And so it's a war that is being fought by the West through proxy. And right now, like the other correspondent says, there's a lot of secrecy as to the equipment that are coming in and their usages. So the West is not going to lay back. So Russia warning or no warning, it's like sometimes it could be taken as a grandstanding, because right now he's finding it difficult. I'm not a military expert, but from my own observation, I think he's finding it difficult to achieve his military objective, and that is why he's now shifting the goalposts. And he's thinking that his hold on Europe for gas and energy supply will make those countries not to be too aggressive against him. But like I said earlier, security outweighs every other country, because it's only when you are secured that you can talk of economic prosperity. And right now, he might be grandstanding, but the sanctions are hitting hard. Whatever Russia wants to do in terms of his threats, does he want to declare nuclear? Others have it. So what else does he want to do? Does he want to go full blast and level Ukraine? Of course, that becomes a war crime. You discover that every other person's now, the International Criminal Court is talking about it. So he has limited options. And those options he has right now are the ones that he's given a lifeline from other agencies like the UN and other people that are trying to pacify him. So he has those lifelines to explore, because right now he's almost fighting against the entire world that has as much capability as his has, but because they are more democratic and they are more accountable to their people, they are also being more diplomatic in coming out full-fledged to confront Russia.
Yeah, and the Russian president is trying to appear a bit more humanitarian. You know, when he spoke with the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres yesterday about providing a humanitarian corridor in Mariupol, he said, yes, he does want one. He will even help to facilitate that. But, you know, the details, the fine lines still have to be ironed out. Mr. Antonio Guterres will be meeting the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky today. And, you know, we're just looking at, you know, what the gains of those visits probably are at the end of the day. Diplomatic efforts were made before this invasion on February 24, but nearly 3 months on, we're in the third month now. Do you think diplomatic efforts are still effective in this war?
Well, every war situation must always end up on the table, even if there is a victory on the ground. You still need to come to the table to negotiate. We've seen it happen all over the world. Even where one is a victor, there still need to be negotiations. So the place of diplomacy cannot be outstretched or overruled, no matter the circumstances. Even if today, which is unlikely, and God forbid, that Russia is able to subdue Ukraine and occupy, there'll still be diplomatic discussions in order to get certain things done and certain things restored back to normalcy. So the end of diplomacy cannot be, can never be in sight. There will still be diplomacy. Yes, Russia, it's a strong country. Putin is a proud man, and he also wants to show the fact that he doesn't take instruction from the West, and so he can go about to do what he wants to do, just as every other Western countries can do also certain things in areas even with or without authorization from the UN or other places. So that is where Putin find himself. But Putin also knows that the fact that he has limited friendship, he has limited accomplices in whatever thing he's doing. Right now, apart from China that is standing aloof, and maybe India that has not come full. I'm talking about Western power. I'm talking about powers now. I don't think there's any other power that is in friendly town with Russia. He has talked about diplomatic humanitarian corridor before, and it didn't come to pass. And so it will be difficult to believe. I mean, he talked that he wasn't going to invade Ukraine, but that came to pass. So it will be difficult for most people to believe what Putin will be telling them with respect to his plans. And just like your correspondent said again, the man that can say the final word is Putin, not even his officials. And that was why I was talking about the parliament he was addressing, what power they have and what authority they have to checkmate or to at least legislate on what happens in Russia.
Right.
So it's only Putin that can tell you what he wants to do or not. So diplomacy will keep working. And all we are praying is that he will match his word with action, because right now, the world is going to a place where he's finding himself more isolated. Yes, he has economic edge with gas to Europe and to some other thing, but militarily there's equally a match in the Western power of NATO and others. And so what else does he have that other than to embrace diplomacy and have the lifeline that the United Nations in general is offering right now? And so that by the time the man goes to Kiev and they have discussion with Zelensky and others, then there will be something amicable working out, so that there will be humanitarian corridors opened up in those areas, especially Mariupol and some other places, so that this war can sensibly be brought to an end, and then let's start the rebuilding processes.
Lester, thank you so much, for speaking with us this morning and your analysis on the issue. Appreciate your joining us on the program.
I'm Amachi, thank you very much. It's always my pleasure. I'm always available for any national service. Thank you.
We have more coming up after the break, including a story about the miracle coming to Mariupol in a battered red van. Stay with us. Welcome back to our special coverage. Now, protesters in the southern city of Kherson were waving flags and chanting against Volodymyr Saldo, the former mayor of Kherson, who's been reappointed by Russian forces occupying the region. A sound of small explosions is audible in the distance while people walk away from an area where smoke was seen rising. Emergency personnel assisted injured persons on the ground. Now, the location of this video, which we're watching right now, was verified through the configuration of the buildings, which matched existing street view photography. The Interfax news agency cited a senior official as saying elsewhere in the south of Ukraine, Russian troops are taking part of Zaporizhia and Mykolaiv regions, as well as part of Kharkiv to the east of Kyiv. Well, Russia claims to have captured Kherson city and says the city will be transitioning to using the ruble from May 1st, according to Russian media. Kirill Stremusyov, who's a deputy chairman of the military civilian administration of the region, says the transition will take place over a period of 4 months, during which the Russian ruble and Ukrainian hryvnia will be in circulation. After this period, the region will fully transition, it says, to using Russian currency. That will be the ruble. Well, still more reactions to Russia's stoppage of gas to European countries, Poland and Bulgaria. 4 European countries, however, pay in ruble already. Largest gas buyers, Germany, Turkey, Italy, France, Austria and Poland. EU unity may now be tested, even though the EU says it already has plans against Russian gas. Payment deadlines are starting to fall due next month. Governments and companies across Europe have to decide whether to meet the new rules or face the prospect of gas rationing. 4 European gas buyers have already paid for supplies in rubles, and 10 of them have set up accounts allowing them to comply with the new rules by the Russian government. Several companies say they will also continue paying in euros without laying out the mechanisms clearly. Russia has threatened more cutoffs after the halt in gas flows to Poland and Bulgaria on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban said last week he's willing to pay in rubles. He says other countries say they're not going to pay in rubles, but regarding further levels of energy supply, gas availability is the issue right now. There are plans already prepared to avoid being caught unawares. This way, according to Poland, its economy will suffer as little as possible from reducing its gas supply. Our business correspondent, Ini John Mekwa, is here with some information, I guess, on the current what's currently going on. You know, those two countries, Poland and Bulgaria, the prime ministers saying they will fight this till the end.
Yes.
This is a breach of contracts, and you know, they have plans in place to make
Yes,
sure
they have plans
Russia
in place.
supplies that gas.
Yes, well, I don't know about to ensure that they supply their gas, but I do know that Poland is already planning to reduce its flights as a way of managing. You know, remember they said they have 80% underground, but it's still, because you don't know how long it's going to last, so you need to have a lasting plan in place, you know. So that's why they're already planning to reduce their flights, to reduce the energy needed and all that. But I mean, as you read there, I think one major thing that comes out of this is the unity of the EU. If we have 23 countries being supplied gas by Russia, and now we hear that 10 of them are already setting up, you know, the rubles account. Because the system that Russia is actually asking for is not that these countries should come and pay in rubles. So you have two accounts with Gazprom Bank, which is the bank connected to the Russian energy institution. So you set up two accounts. One of them will be paid, you pay in your currency, which is euro or dollar, you know. And you have about 60% of those paying in between euro and dollar. You have about 90%. That's the contract that is existing at this time. So you pay in your currency, in your hard currency, and then the bank itself will convert it and sell it into your second ruble account. So each country is supposed to have two accounts with Gazprom. One will be in their currency and the other will be in ruble. But of course, it will be in your name and you have to do all of the paperwork and all of that. So that's what the European countries are actually fighting against. So it's not that they have to go and start looking for rubles and stuff like that. But as it is now, if you have 23 countries being supplied through pipeline gas by Russia, and then you have 4 already paying, truth is, when you try to get those 4 gas buyers who are paid in rubles, you don't get the name at this time. You don't get the name at this time.
I don't think they want to be out there already.
Exactly, because sanctions might just be coming,
yes.
And then you have 10 of them already setting up the ruble account. So what's left is 13 of them. So obviously, there's a lot of tests in the unity of the EU, or even though the EU is persuading them, you know, to stand their grounds and all, I guess reality is beginning to hit on some of those countries.
I'm just wondering how, you know, the euro is doing amidst, you know, this change in economic policy in Russia.
Yeah. Well, yesterday the dollar was up. The euro the other day also gained grounds, but I haven't checked this morning to see how it's doing. But I don't think it's affecting the euro or the dollar, because yesterday the dollar was at a 2-week high. So at this time, it's not. But maybe if this 10 buyers, as they prefer to be called, we're not calling them countries at this time, we're calling them buyers. If these 10 buyers actually go through after setting up the ruble account, then we might actually start seeing the impact. And we won't see that until late next month, because that's when the next contract is due.
Yeah,
so then we would know if Russia will unplug the pipeline for countries like Germany, countries like Turkey. These are the biggest buyers, like France, like Italy. These are the very big buyers. And these countries pay about over $800 million for a month, you know, to Russia. So you can just imagine.
Yeah, there's so much they can do with gas as well. Ini, I'll leave you to do the digging, looking for those 4 countries. While I move on to...
I'll keep looking for those 4 countries.
While I move on to other stories, just very quickly on sports news, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has claimed the country remains open to staging international sports events. It's by the International Olympic Committee urging international federations not to organize events there or in Belarus. International Ice Hockey Federation 2023 Men's Ice Hockey World Championships in St. Petersburg yesterday became the latest high-profile event to be moved from Russia due to the invasion of Ukraine. However, Putin has claimed that all athletes and officials will be welcome in Russia for sporting competitions. Russia and Belarus have largely been frozen out of international sport since the launch of what Moscow describes as its special operation military operation that is, in Ukraine on February 24. And finally on the program, as Russian forces tighten their siege on Mariupol, missiles rained down. Mikhailo Pushchev, a volunteer, drove into the city 6 times last month to evacuate citizens, somehow surviving despite his red van being all but destroyed. A 36-year-old Ukrainian who once ran a nightclub in the city said he evacuated more than 200 people by himself on his 6 perilous trips, and others began to join him in convoy into his hometown. A miracle worker indeed. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.